The ice crystals clawed at her skin, a relentless attack that even her royal Xylarian blood couldn't withstand for long. Each gust of wind that screamed across the frozen plains of this forsaken planet felt like 1,000 tiny razors. Her bodyguard, Jox, stood a few feet away, a stubborn statue in the swirling snow. His loyalty was a tangible, infuriating thing, a silent vow that kept him standing guard over their pathetic excuse for a shelter when he should have been inside, preserving his own life. His species, she'd learned, was maddeningly resilient, but she wasn't. Her pride, the last shred of her stolen throne, was a cold comfort against the creeping hypothermia. She had no choice. Swallowing what little of it remained, Princess Lyra's voice cut through the wind, an order born of pure desperation. "Shut up, human. We're freezing. Get in my bed now." Jox didn't move. For a single, terrifying moment, Lyra thought he'd refuse. Disobedience wasn't in his programming, not the rigid code of a machine, but the ingrained discipline of a Terran Protectorate guard. He was sworn to obey her, the last heir of the 7th Galactic Dynasty. But there were limits. Surely, this crossed the line. His silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the keening wind. She watched his broad shoulders, dusted with snow, stay perfectly still. Her own body had started to tremble uncontrollably, her teeth chattering so hard she feared they might crack. The single thermal cocoon, her bed, was rated for her core temperature, but only with sustained, close proximity heat. It was failing. Finally he turned. His helmet retracted with a soft hiss, revealing a face carved from granite and shadowed by exhaustion. His stormy, sea-colored eyes held a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher. Shock, disgust, or something else. "Princess," he began, his voice a low, rough rumble. "That wasn't a request, Jox," she snapped, the words brittle. Pride was a foolish thing, but it was all she had left. After her own blood had betrayed her, slaughtered her family, and sent her fleeing to the outer rim with nothing but the clothes on her back and this stoic human. Pride was her only armor. "My core temperature is critical. My biology isn't like yours. I'm fragile here. Your human body radiates an obscene amount of heat. You will be a furnace. Do you understand your function?" He simply nodded, his expression unreadable. He moved with an unsettling efficiency, unstrapping his outer gear and placing his pulse rifle within arm's reach of the shelter's entrance. Always the guard, always ready. Even stripped down to his black thermal undersuit, he radiated a quiet competence that both infuriated and reassured her. He paused at the edge of the cocoon, his large frame seeming to fill their tiny makeshift cave. The order had been given. The line had been crossed. As he unzipped the cocoon, Lyra felt a new kind of cold wash over her, one that had nothing to do with the ice fear. The moment he slid into the cocoon was an agony of awkwardness. It was designed for one Xylarian, meaning it was barely enough for one human and one very slender princess. Every point of contact was a jolt against her freezing skin. His body was a furnace, just as she'd predicted. The heat bled from him in a staggering wave that was both a life-saving relief and an intimate violation. She tried to press herself against the far wall, to maintain a sliver of distance, but her own body, the traitor, instinctively sought the heat. Inching closer, for long minutes, they lay in rigid silence. She could feel the steady, powerful thrum of his heartbeat against her back. It was slower than a Xylarian's, a deep rhythm that seemed to echo in her bones. The sound of life. She'd spent months with this man, fleeing assassins sent by her treacherous uncle. He'd been a shadow, a silent weapon. He'd vaporized threats, navigated asteroid fields, and bartered for fuel, all without a word of complaint. He was her human bodyguard, a tool for survival. But here, in the suffocating dark, pressed against him, he was Jox, a man, a warm, breathing man whose presence was the only thing keeping her from becoming a permanent part of the landscape. "Why did you stay with me?" she whispered, the question escaping before she could stop it. Her voice small and stripped of its usual authority. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "I was assigned to your father," he said finally, his voice a low vibration against her spine. "He made me give my word. Protect the heir, no matter the cost." A simple promise to a dead man. For a species so often called primitive, humans had a capacity for loyalty that was almost spiritual. Her own people, with all their advanced tech, had torn each other apart for a throne. This human, this space orc as some elites called his kind, was holding fast to a promise made to a ghost. The absurdity and the profound honor of it all made her throat tighten. "A foolish promise," she murmured, but the words lacked conviction. "Maybe," he conceded, "but it's the one I made. This journey is just getting started, and the connection between these two is about to be tested like never before. If you're dying to see where this forced proximity leads, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. And if you're a fan of sci-fi romance and stories that prove just how strong humanity can be, subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss what happens next." The warmth had just begun to chase the deep chill from her bones, when a new sound cut through the howling wind. A low, guttural scratching, followed by a heavy thump against the roof. Jox was instantly alert. The comforting rhythm of his heart quickened, and she felt the muscles in his arm, curled protectively near her, tensed into steel. What was that? Lyra breathed, a spike of ice in her gut. Stay quiet, he commanded. His voice was no longer the reluctant bedfellows but the guard's. The shift was immediate. He moved with a swift, silent grace that belied his size, unzipping the cocoon just enough to slip out into the frigid air. The loss of his heat was an immediate, painful shock. She watched as he grabbed his pulse rifle. The scratching came again, louder, now with a deep growl that vibrated through the ice floor. Jax moved to the narrow entrance of the shelter and peered out. Ice stalker, he muttered, a curse and a diagnosis in one. Big one. It smells the heat. Lyra's blood ran cold. Ice stalkers were the apex predators of this world, known to tear through ship hulls for a meal. A single one was a death sentence. We can't fight that, she said, her voice trembling. That thing's hide is too thick for the rifle. Not planning to fight it, Jox said, his focus absolute. Planning to outthink it, he turned back, his eyes locking onto hers in the dim light. For the first time, she saw not a subordinate, but a partner. Your people have a low-level psionic hum, right? A frequency you emit when you're distressed. She nodded, confused. It's a vestigial trait, barely detectable, but detectable to a predator with hypersensitive hearing. He pressed, can you focus it? Project it away from us. It was an insane idea. It would take a level of concentration she hadn't attempted in years, and it would leave her drained. But looking at Jox, at the fierce determination in his eyes, she saw he wasn't asking her to be a princess. He was asking her to be a soldier, a survivor. She nodded again, this time with resolve. She closed her eyes, shutting out the cold, the fear, the memory of his warmth. She reached deep inside, past the grief and exile, for that faint, buzzing frequency of her own life. She found the fragile thread of energy and, with all her will, pushed it out, casting it like a line into the storm. The scratching stopped. The growling paused, replaced by a low, questioning chuff. Then, with a final, heavy snarl, the sounds began to move away, chasing the ghost she'd created. Exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. The moment the creature was gone, the psionic thread snapped, and the world tilted. Jox was there in an instant, catching her before she slumped to the icy floor. He scooped her up with startling ease and deposited her back into the cocoon's life-saving warmth. He slid in after her without hesitation, his previous reluctance gone, replaced by a grim necessity. He pulled a zip tight, enclosing them once more. This time, there was no awkwardness. This time, when she pressed against him, it wasn't just for heat, it was something more. Her head found the curve of his shoulder, her arm resting on his chest, feeling that steady, reassuring heartbeat. He had seen her at her most vulnerable, desperate, and powerful, all in one night. He had relied on her, not as a charge to be protected, but as a partner. They had faced death together and won. You were impressive, she said, the words muffled against his undersuit. It was the highest praise she had ever given anyone, and it felt completely inadequate. He let out a soft breath, a sound that might have been a chuckle in a warmer, safer place. You weren't so bad yourself, princess. The title wasn't mocking. It was different, tinged with a respect that wasn't there before. They lay in a new kind of silence, one filled with a fragile understanding. The gulf between an exiled princess and her human bodyguard had been bridged, not by words, but by a shared command, a shared fear, and a shared victory. Here, in the heart of a frozen wasteland, she was no longer just his princess, and he was no longer just her god. They were two survivors, huddled together, finding an impossible warmth in the space between them. The order had been an act of desperation, but it had forged something far stronger than she could have ever imagined. The storm raged on, but inside the shelter a quiet peace had settled. They were still exiles, still freezing, still worlds apart. But for the first time since her world was stolen, Lyra didn't feel completely alone. She was in her bed, with her human, and for now, that was enough. The command had been about survival, but as she drifted off to the sound of his steady heartbeat, she realized it had become the beginning of something else entirely. What do you think the future holds for Lyra and Jox? Will they ever get off this ice planet? Drop your theories and what you'd love to see happen next in the comments below. Your ideas genuinely inspire these stories, and if you want to join us for the next chapter of their adventure, make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching. Until next time.